The global monetary system is changing right before our eyes, and understanding how it's changed throughout history is the key to understanding what we're seeing today. In this video, we're going to look at the system that we have today and where it's going. Understanding this is the difference between you and your family hopefully surviving this massive shift or actually thriving and getting ahead. You do not want to miss this, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So if you're new to the channel, on Thursdays, we talk about investing, cryptocurrencies. On Tuesdays, we talk about before you invest, business success, making money, saving money, all right? But today we're talking about investing. We're talking about Bitcoin. We're talking about investing in the cryptocurrencies. There's a massive shift happening, and if you don't know what's gonna happen, it can be very, very dangerous for you. I don't want that to happen, so I'm gonna bring this to you. Now, this is gonna be a two-part video series because this is long, it's a deep subject, so it's gonna be part one. Next week we'll have part two. Now, I also wanna tell you guys just real quick, I have a podcast, Market Disruptors Podcast. It's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher. Please go check out the podcast, download it, and rate it and review it. Market Disruptors, iTunes and Stitcher. Every single week, twice a week, I sit down with a high-level person in the blockchain, cryptocurrency space that's building or investing in the space, and I ask them the questions that you should be asking if you had the opportunity to do that. So we're learning, right? I say success leaves clues. We're asking these people what we can learn from them, and I'm bringing that to you each and every week. So go check it out, Market Disruptors Podcast. All right. Now let's get right into it. So today we are talking about the end of the global dollar standard, all right? For those of you who aren't aware, the US dollar, it's the world reserve currency. What does that mean? How did it become the world reserve currency? What happened? What would it be like if it wasn't the world reserve currency? Well, those are all things that we're gonna find out. You may not like the answer, but you can't bury your head in the sand. You have to know what's going on because we need to know what's coming next, what's gonna happen and what's coming next. Now, again, this is gonna be a two-part series. This is part one right now. So the thing that you have to understand is that the world's changing. It's been changing, it is changing, it will be changing. But right now, today, where we're alive right now, we're in a very transitional place in history. So well, there's a lot of things that are happening right now. There's multiple cycles converging all together, technology cycles, political cycles, things like that. And this is one of those. And we're in this very transitional place in history. When you look back in history, this is gonna be a key date. And basically what's going on, what we're going to talk about today is this global monetary policy that's changing. And I'll show you. It happens about every 100 years or so, at least throughout history it has. And so what I mean by that is the global monetary policy. So the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. So the whole world operates on US dollars. Gold is priced in dollars, oil is priced in dollars, etc. I'll explain what that means. And it's been this way for a little over 100 years, about 105 years, all right? It's been the reserve currency of the world, but it hasn't always been that way, and it won't always be that way. And it's changing right now. And so like I said, it's been this way for about 100 years. I'm gonna show you why it's changing, and so you're alive right now in this transitional period. But what comes next after the dollar isn't the reserve currency anymore, all right? Well, I don't have a crystal ball. It would sure make this a heck of a lot easier if I did, but we can certainly speculate what will happen, especially by looking at history to see what happens. Now, what happens when the US dollar isn't the reserve currency of the world? Could it be gold? There's a good chance it could be gold again. There's a lot of countries that are positioning right now to stockpile their gold to try to relaunch their currencies as gold-backed. Gold could certainly be that. Bitcoin could be that. I believe that Bitcoin will be a global store of value. I believe it most likely will become a world reserve currency. Will it happen right now over the next couple of years? No, probably not. It's a little bit too early. So gold, it could be Bitcoin. Will it be some other cryptocurrency? We've seen Russia talking about launching their own gold-backed cryptocurrency. So Russia, I said, a lot of these countries are stockpiling their gold to launch their gold-backed currencies. And Russia is one of those. Russia's been stockpiling gold, China's been stockpiling gold, but Russia's talking about actually launching a gold-backed cryptocurrency, and we know those are coming. It could be some other basket of currencies or commodities. So Facebook coin, for example, Libra coin, they said they're going to back their back their cryptocurrency by a basket of currencies and things like that. We could see stable coins that are backed by commodities. So this many barrels of oil, this many ounces of gold, and etc. So it could be all kinds of things like that. And I'm going to discuss more about that at the end. But I just want to let you know we're going to talk about what's coming next. But if we go back to history, again, if we understand history, we can see what's going to happen in the future. And again, the US dollar has not always been the world reserve currency. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, the US is not even that old of a country in comparison to the rest of the world. So in more, I guess we'd say modern times, from 1450 to 1530, Portugal was the world reserve currency. Portugal was kind of leading the way, right? We know with the Spanish, explorers and Christopher Columbus and all of that. Then we go into 1530 to 1640. We had Spain, and Spain was the world reserve currency, and that lasted 110 years. And then it went to Netherlands from 1640 to 1720, and that lasted about 80 years. And then it went to France, and then we saw from 1720 to 1850, France was this world superpower, world reserve currency, and that lasted about 95 years. See, they're all about 100 years. And then it went to Britain from 1850 to 1920. Great Britain was the world superpower, was the global reserve currency, and that lasted 105 years. And now from about 1914 until now, until we are here, 2019, USA, the United States of America, is the global superpower, and the US dollar is the reserve currency. It's been about 105 years. So we are 5 years short of the record. Let that sink in. So we know at some point something's going to change. Now, before the US dollar, I just kind of broke that down to you, how it went from stage to stage to stage. But I think it's important to understand how it actually changes from stage to stage. Like why did it go from one country to the next? Like, what happened from France to go to Britain? What happened to cause it to go from Britain to the USA? And we have to understand the process of how this happened so we can understand what we're looking at right now. I talk about this a lot in the videos, and most of you guys aren't really caught up on the current affairs of what's happening, and a lot of it is because you don't have the context of what happened in the past. So let's talk about that. Now, I know I'm getting through these topics pretty quickly. If any of you guys are history buffs, don't be too hard on me in the comments, because I have to talk about these things pretty quick. Otherwise, you'll be here for days, right? And I try to make it simple and easy to understand. So hopefully that makes sense. Give me a thumbs up if you like that. I'm trying to give this education out that is easy to understand and in bite-sized pieces. Now, before the US dollar, how did we get here? So like I said, showed in that chart before, England, Britain was the superpower. They had the sterling, and they were the world reserve currency from about 1816. And that really, they took that from France, which was at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. That's a little bit of history. And at that point, they had the gold standard. So they had gold, and gold was backing their currency. So it was always known that the currency equaled a certain amount of gold. And what happened is the sterling died and basically passed the torch, passed the baton over to the US dollar. Now, many think that this happened at the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. And it kind of did, but the reason why it's really not like that is, it's important because we have to understand this, right? So it wasn't a single event, and a lot of people are looking for that one event. Oh yeah, I see this sign, and I see this sign, and I see this sign, but that hasn't done anything so far. But it has. It's been slowly changing, and I'm going to explain that to you. So many think that Bretton Woods was the death of the sterling, but it actually took place about 30 years, or I should say over about a 30-year period. So Bretton Woods was when the baton actually switched, but it actually started about 30 years earlier, back in 1914. And back in 1914 is where it all began. It was the turning point. Because this was, from about July to November of 1914 is when World War I started. And it created this enormous financial panic when World War I started. And the London Stock Exchange and the New York Stock Exchange basically had to close down. There was too much panic. Everyone was trying to get their money out. And basically, at that time, like I said, they were on the gold standard. So all money was redeemable for gold. And so everybody was scrambling around the world to try and get their gold out of the system. So gold has always been, and I still believe it is, a chaos hedge. When things get crazy, I don't want this worthless paper. give me the gold, right? That's what happens. And so that's exactly what happened in 1914. And they had to shut down the stock exchange to prevent this run on the banks or run on the stock exchange. And so really that was when the power started to shift over. Now, the US was also short of gold. It wasn't much better at the time, but what allowed the US to get ahead was that one, I mean, they were able to close down the Europeans, right? So the New York Stock Exchange closed to Europeans, so they couldn't sell their stocks to get the gold. But what happened is, as that war started kicking off, the U.S. exports took off. And all of a sudden, the U.S. was shipping all these exports, cotton and wheat and things like that. And as it started exporting, money started flowing in, right? That's what happens, right? But it wasn't money, it was gold. And gold started flowing back into the USA. And then the US banks were able to, stockpile now with cash and gold, were able to start loaning money back to the UK and France. And over this process, throughout World War I, at the end of World War I, the US emerged the creditor of the world, right? It became the gold power of the world, the creditor to the world, because the UK and France needed to borrow all this money to fight this pointless war, and they became debtor nations. The US loaned them the money, almost egging it on, stoking it on, and then emerged as the creditor, as the superpower. Now, it wasn't as simple as that, right? It was a 20-year struggle. That's what I call it, the 20-year struggle. So during this period of time from 1914 when it first broke out, for 20 years the power kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And there was even a period of time where the power was shared, and there wasn't one reserve currency, there was kind of two reserve currencies. And one would get the upper hand, and they kind of went back and forth like this. But in 1939, England suspended gold shipments. That now they went from World War I. They kind of had this period where they seesawed back and forth, and then they started World War II before they were even recovered. And so then, again, they had to suspend gold shipments. And at that point, people were done with it. People, if you can't give me my money, paper wasn't money, right? Paper meant that I was owed money. Today we still think of paper as money, but paper didn't used to be money, it was gold. And so if you wouldn't give me what was mine, if you wouldn't redeem this IOU for gold, then I was over you. And after they suspended that after World War II, people had enough, and that was it, and they walked away. All right, that was the process. Then finally Bretton Woods happened. Now, a lot of people maybe don't even know what Bretton Woods is. But Bretton Woods was the agreement that happened in 1944, which officially had the US dollar take over from the sterling, right? So that was the year. It wasn't when it happened, it was when it was formally put on paper. But as I showed, it had been happening over time. And so at that point, they came to this agreement, and they agreed that the US dollar would be backed by gold, and it would be $35 for every ounce of gold. And the US would hold everybody's gold, so all the countries of the world would send their gold to the US, and Fort Knox in the US would hold all the gold, and the US would print dollars to match the gold. And so for every ounce of gold, there would be $35. And then what happened, because the USA could be trusted and they could store the gold and they'd print the dollars to be $35 an ounce, then all the currencies of the world could peg their dollars to the US dollar. So today, we have stable coins, and you hear a lot about these stable coins. And so we have all these dollar-backed stable coins, and the stable coin is backed by a dollar. That's essentially what these countries did. But they backed their paper dollar to the US paper dollar, because the US dollar was pegged to gold. All right. So in a sense, all the currencies of the world were still pegged to gold. They were pegged to a currency that was pegged to gold. So they were pegged to gold, right? And that's what happened. Why is this all important? Why am I even telling you this? And what does this have to do with investing? Well, a lot, right? It's important to understand the process of how this happened, because like I said, a lot of you guys are waiting for this big incident. But really, it's not about the big incident. It's about the little things that are happening. And as history shows us time and time again, it's all these little things. It's this process. It's a seesaw power struggle. It's a fight. Countries are fighting back and forth. And I believe that's exactly what we're seeing right now. This slow, steady progress where the US dollar is being deteriorated, while these wars are being fought over the dollar and the reserve currency status, while new ones are starting to pop up. And I'm going to outline those for you, all right? I'm going to show you what those are, but just know that signs are already visible. But what happens next, right? That's what we all want to know. We want to know what the future holds for us, because as investors, I want to be positioned where I need to be today so that when it does happen in the future, I benefit. Now, hopefully that doesn't sound bad. I'm not like waiting for the world to end so I can get rich or anything, but you're either going to be on the side that loses everything and you and your family are going to suffer, or you're going to be on the side that's prepared. Now, I kind of made up my mind about 10 years ago that I was kind of done with politics for the most part, but the reason why I was going to pay attention is to protect my family. That's it for me. It's all about my family. And of course, I'm sharing this information with you guys because I want all you guys to benefit as well. So it's not about being greedy and trying to get rich. It's about either not getting wiped out or making it through and protecting your family. So what happens next? So after that, we're going to talk about all that next week. We've gone too far already. I know it kept you too long. So part 2, we're going to talk about what's happened since the Bretton Woods Agreement. We're talking about the dollar inflation. We're going to talk about what Richard Nixon did in 1971. We're going to talk about this deal, this secret deal that was done with Saudi Arabia that actually didn't come out in the public until like 2016. We're going to talk about how the US dollar is being used as a weapon and why that's been bad. We're going to talk about how now our enemies and our allies are starting to band together without us. And we're going to talk about how this cycle is starting all over again. That's all we're going to cover next week. So make sure you're subscribed. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the alert. And then give me a thumbs up if you like this video. If you like these kinds of videos, let me know in the comments, because I always want to know what content to bring you guys. Sometimes I'm going back in the vaults for this history. Give me likes if you like it, thumbs down if you don't like it, and tune in next week. And that's it. To your success. I'm out.